thank you for joining today's webinar on STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and what it's like to be a STEM ambassador. It's a really, really interesting session today, and I hope you will find it useful. We want it to be as sort of informal and discussion orientated as possible. So if you have questions or you are a STEM ambassador and want to contribute some of your experiences, please could you pop a message in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that as we go through, and we can then answer your questions, but also introduce you into the conversation. If we haven't too many people, we can open it up a bit wider, but we'll just set the scene and get it started. So introductions, I'm Rachel Bridge, I'm Guild Chair, and then also in my spare time, I like to be a STEM ambassador. And I've been doing that now for just over 12 months and was really inspired to do this because of the impact I thought it could have. And I think my expectations and the reality might not always have aligned, but it's definitely been a really positive experience. But I want to introduce Ben, and if you can just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, that would be great.
Rachel, yeah, my name is Ben Fearns. I'm a director and own a company called RedFern Engineering. As a company, we're really focused on asset health, maintaining asset health in the networks. But from a personal perspective, I'm very passionate. I'm a STEM ambassador. I'm passionate about being a STEM ambassador. I have been for the last, say, 2016. The reason it's 2016 and that's so bright in my mind is that it was when my first daughter was born, and that's what really gave me a kick into doing something, putting something back into the industry, helping promote women in engineering. I'm very passionate about women in engineering, and the driver really was my first daughter, and I've got two daughters now, and it's made me more passionate about it. Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, no worries. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, my experience wasn't dissimilar to that. I've always been an advocate of our industry and have always really enjoyed going out to the university that I went to and others to talk about careers in, I'm a surveyor by trade, but in surveying, but also in energy and infrastructure, because I just feel it's something you don't even know about. You know, you don't really think about when you're at school or university how the products we need get to where we need them to. And I think that schools do an excellent job, but they can't explain every career option. So I'd spent quite a lot of time with universities and found out about becoming a STEM ambassador. And so I also have a daughter and thought I couldn't think of anything better than spending a bit of time at her school and then others, just talking about the roles and options there are out there. So I think just let's break it back down to real simple, the simple process. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you actually became a STEM ambassador, what the commitment was, and then I can talk through my process as well?
Yeah, sure. So I was working at Costain at the time, and Costain were really supportive. So I was lucky. I think my experience when I've talked to other STEM ambassadors is by and large companies are quite supportive. So I just went online, simple as that. Went online, searched, become a STEM ambassador. Where did I hear about it? You know what, looking back now, I can't quite remember where I heard about being a STEM ambassador. I might have read it in a magazine, I might have seen it on an advert, I'm not sure. But it was as simple as going online, searching, become a STEM ambassador. And then the process after that was quite quick. My process was quite quick. I was lucky. I'm very lucky to live in Manchester, or just outside Manchester. And in Manchester, you've got a Museum of Science and Industry, and that's a hub. That's a hub to be a STEM ambassador. So it was, 4 stops on the train for me into the Museum of Science and Industry, meet the team, a group of brilliant people. Everything was really cool and slick. I think the only bit of process we spoke about it before was the background checks, which is fine, which is, absolutely should be required. People are working with children. And then I think it took in total about 6 to 8 weeks. But in that time, I think I was in the Museum of Science and Industry 2 or 3 times. Was speaking to people who were leading the courses. Another cool thing about it, certainly in my experience, was that we got to go to STEM ambassadors. You get a badge and you get access to behind the scenes. You get behind the scenes access to Museum of Science and Industry in Manchester. There's one in London, I think there's one over in Leeds. And we got to go downstairs. We got to see, you know, the archives. We were allowed to take things out of the archives to take schools. For example, one of the things that I took to a school was the evolution of calculators. It was really interesting to actually have the stuff that they've got. It's museum pieces, obviously, and it's a really good resource. It's really accessible. It's really easy. Yeah, that was my experience getting on to being a STEM ambassador. And it's the support is there all the time if you need it. You know, it's just a click away or a phone call away all the time.
Yeah, I would.
How about you, Rachel?
Yeah, I'd completely agree. My process was slightly different. I did it all online. So applied through the website to become a STEM ambassador. It was one of those things I'd always thought about doing, but thought it would take loads of time. So it was always one of those things that, look, I've got loads on, just not gonna have time to do it. And then I thought, actually, why don't I just do it? How long is it actually going to take? And it literally, as you described, I did the DBS check. I did some online training to help support me what to expect when going to talk to students, and of different ages. I think it's really difficult sometimes to understand, especially if you're not a parent, what the different key stages are and what children actually understand and know at different ages. And I think that was really helpful for me. My daughter's in key stage 1, so very start of school, and you know, the difference between key stage 2 and 3 is a massive leap, and the topics that they discuss and cover at schools is quite different. So understanding for me how to tailor my presentation about surveying, STEM, infrastructure, energy to the audience was really useful. So I just found it fascinating that, you know, talking to sort of 8 to 9 year olds, they understand so much about where their energy comes from. They really care about the environment and the environmental impact. But when you're talking to key stage 1, you've got to break it back down, and you know, they probably don't even call it science in key stage 1. You know, it's more about how things work and why things work in the way that they do. So for me, the training was really helpful to help me tailor my language to suit the audience I was stood in front of. And the same with the university students or the secondary school leavers. And I think what's brilliant is the STEM ambassador portal. You can upload your profile, and if you actually really love connecting with key stage 1, key stage 2, hands-on, practical stuff, you can take your hard hat, your fireproof overalls, you can show them some really awesome pictures or get them into groups and do little workshops. If that's what you really enjoy doing, that's what you can do. You don't have to talk. If your idea of hell is standing in front of 60 teenagers, you don't have to pitch in. And I think that's what's so brilliant about it, is that you can just pick the bit that really works for you. So we were really so that really helped me tailor my presentations, but also work out which ones I wanted to do. And the portal's brilliant because you can basically say what time you've got available. You might have an hour over the next month, and it will just bring up a list of opportunities that you're asked to speak at. And some of them are in person, some of them are online, and some of them you can take practical examples to. Some of them you might be looking at people's CVs or helping them with interview prep, because not everybody's been in the workspace, especially due to the impact of COVID. So you can just pick what absolutely suits you based on your time commitments. And I think that's what makes it quite flexible for me.
I think there's a couple of things there that you've just said that really resonate with me, Rachel. And one of them is tailoring the way that you speak to people, because it's taught me so much about that. And if I take a step back from that, it's the confidence you get from doing it. So when I first started, I've always been up for getting up and talking. And you know, you obviously get better. The more you do it, you get the better you get. But when I started as a STEM ambassador, I was doing interviews. We went to local schools around the Northwest and helped to do interviews for leavers. And that's, you're not on stage, you're not presenting, it's you and a teacher and a student, and it's quite small and it's quite intimate, and you get to build your confidence. You don't get thrown in at you can take what you want, as big a bite as you want. And it's only in the last, I'd say three years maybe, that I've taken bigger bites and I've grown in confidence. But I think part of the reason why I've grown in confidence and I've been able to tailor my speaking and the language that I use is because I've done this. I think we naturally would get exposed to it in the work that we do normally, but this is kind of supercharges it a little bit and gives you access to, the tailoring the language. I think is such a good phrase. It's key. Certainly with my daughters as well. If I go back to the reason why I'm doing it, am I able to speak to them on their level? Well, I'm certainly better at doing it now for being a STEM ambassador. So yeah, a couple of things you said down really resonate with me.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got quite a lot from it personally. So despite it being just a really good thing to do anyway, you mentioned, your previous organisation and your current one, it's just a good thing to do. But it sounds like personally you've taken quite a lot of development from the process.
Yeah, I believe I have. I really believe I have. And they support you. And you've got to have the guts to actually go and do it. But once you do it, it's the hardest part is signing up, I found. And I was worried. I mean, I was nervous before this call. You get nervous before every time I speak, but I enjoy it. And the reason I enjoy it is probably because of the journey that I've been on and the growth that I've had. It's definitely some of it's to do with being a STEM ambassador, for sure.
Yeah. I think if anybody's in any doubt, the personal development that you get, and just sort of the way, I think kids have an amazing way, especially the younger ones, the sort of under 11s, have this incredible way of bringing you back down to reality and making everything very here and now and real. They're incredibly present, and they also, the questions they ask, I've done several with in assemblies, and you'll have maybe 60 children. And the teachers have to ask them to stop asking me questions, and they literally ask anything. They're at that stage where they're really inquisitive, and no question is a silly question. And it's just I was talking about a pipeline scheme that I was working on in down in the southeast, and we'd had to stop work because Roman snails were in our working area, and so I had to tell the contractors we've got to stop. And everybody who's on this course probably from a pipeline background, and we know how challenging it is when that has to happen. And I was telling these children, these Roman snails, we literally you can't apply at the time, you couldn't apply for a license to move them. You have to literally stand and watch them move off the spread. And when you've got contractors with all the kit and equipment and diggers and everything ready to go, and you're saying, hang on, just got to let these snails move, and snails move at a rate of 1 meter per day, but not necessarily in the direction that you want them to move in, and you can't pick them up and move them. And stories like that, these children were like absolutely fascinated and just thought it was incredible, and wanted to know more and more about it, and how did we protect them, and what sort of snails did they you get these conversations with children, and they just I think they really shone a light on things that I just thought were part of every day. They found really interesting and wanted to know more about. Have you had any tricky questions or interesting questions from children?
Well, it's the different age groups is I find quite interesting. The different age groups ask very different questions. So if we're working with a group of primary school children, what did we do? We did a lesson. So we speak to the teachers because they're doing different subjects. So that's I think that's key. Speak to the team at school to find out what they're doing. Try and make it relative. If you want to go in, if you want to talk about I don't know, dinosaurs, and they're not learning about dinosaurs, they're learning about space, and that's probably not the best thing to do. So speak to the teachers. We did one with a school in Wythenshawe, which was filtration. They were doing filtration at school. And I was working at Manchester Airport at the time. We were working with jet fuel, and we kind of came up with the help of Museum of Science and Industry and the leaders of the STEM team. We came up with a 2-hour kind of workshop on filtration and getting crude oil to become, how do you get crude oil to become jet fuel?
Yeah.
And then we had these like jars with murky water, and it basically just spent 2 hours playing. And at the end of it, someone's got relatively clear water, and you get a prize. But to answer your question, it's the different. So primary school kids, by and large, are just up for anything. But then you kind of get into secondary school. And the question I got asked more when I was doing some more careers fairs with secondary school. How much do you earn? That was the question I got asked most. Is there any point me doing what you're doing? how much do you earn? And do you just think, if that's what's important to you, then, you know, fair play to you. I obviously wasn't interested enough in the careers that I was doing.
I think it's interesting though, isn't it? Because I think children, you know, when you're talking about STEM with primary school children, as you're right, they're interested. They want to get their hands dirty. They want to get involved. They want to see and feel what it looks like. And I think the secondary school ages, and definitely as they get further on, they are thinking about how that impacts on them. So how much do you earn is, you know, is a relatively important question, I guess. But I agree, it get quite complicated when they're sort of challenging you with that. And I think the one thing I always found really useful when I was with the sort of the sixth formers and then the sort of new university students is just talking about how they can add value and what skill set they have naturally, what they can learn about, how you can combine those two and add value. And I think one of the challenges we have in the pipelines industry is that there's this perception that you have to be an engineer to be in pipelines and infrastructure. But I think it's about pushing those myths out, because, you know, we need surveyors, we need planners, we need lawyers, we need project managers, we need accountants, we need, you know, everybody is required to build the sorts of projects we're involved with. And actually, the more diversity we have in our teams when people come to work, the better the solutions to our problems are. So the more we can go out to schools and universities and educational establishments now to help extend that across and allow people to see where they might fit in, where their skill set might fit in, I think just breaks down some of those barriers to coming into our industry.
I agree 100% with what you've just said. I think another part of that is that it's highlighting the jobs that are out there that aren't necessarily dirty and wet and cold. And I don't mean to be sexist there, but there is a kind of, people look at the pipeline industry and you think it's people digging a hole and putting a pipe in the ground. But that's, like you just said, how do we get the message out there that that's not it? There's a lot more to it, and that's a small bit of it. The construction phase of the project is a relatively small part of the construction life, the life cycle of a project. And how do we get it out there that there's a lot more to it? And how do we attract more diversity into this industry? I don't know the answer to it, but I think part of the answer and part of the solution is for more people to get involved. I believe that. Certainly believe it after I've done it. I believed it enough to actually go and do it, like you. So, you know, I agree with what you just said.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's taking our industry out into the normal world and applying it to everyday life, so that people can understand what it is we do and why it's so important. I mean, I know we've talked about, you know, infrastructure and energy being the fourth emergency service. You know, without water supply, without sanitation, without, you know, being able to turn your heating on or have energy and power, we literally, you know, society is fundamentally based on that. And I think sometimes we're the unsung heroes. You know, people don't think of the careers that are available in our industry, and I think it's something that we can all do more of, whether you know, decide you want to be a STEM ambassador or not. It's a message that we just need to share far and wide, because, you know, it's so important that we expand the delivery teams so that we have, you know, that diverse background, but also people really wanting to come in. I think the skills gap, that is the point you make, is so valid. You know, I know there's hundreds of thousands of people required, not just to new people because of all these new projects we're all building to meet the net zero targets, but also a huge proportion of our skills resource is going to be retiring, and so we need people to backfill those positions. So I think there's an onus on each and every one of us to do what we can, and I think being a STEM ambassador is one option for people to get out there, give something back, but also get quite a lot in return.
Yeah, I agree. And as a business owner, I can tell you firsthand that finding good people, the right resource, is not easy. And there's probably people out there who we need, who want to work, and have probably got the right skill set, and we've just not matched up. This kind of work is a lot closer than people actually realise. Yeah, bridging that little gap. At least we've identified it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, there's lots of ways that the Guild is really, committed to being part of that voice and change. I think from a membership perspective, I think we represent over 300 organisations as a Guild. That's a lot of organisations. If one person from each of those organisations has one conversation, the sort of chain reaction of events, of people that we can touch, you're 7 steps away from everybody. So if you're 7 steps away from everybody, we can all do so much to, share this message. And as you say, there's no overabundance of skills, and our skills gap's massive. So the more we can do to bridge that, the better. I know that Zara's hopefully going to put into the chat function the how you can become a STEM ambassador. So real simple link to the website and the process to click through it. But Ben and I are absolutely here if anybody has any questions about what that looks like and what the time commitments are. But it's honestly really flexible. So if you don't want to travel and you want to do it all from home, you can do it remotely. If you want to get out there and meet people in person, you can do that too. So that's what's great about it, is it's super flexible. I think in terms of personal benefit, you've explained, Ben, why what you've got from it. As a business owner, what's your sort of view in terms of the benefit to your organisation by people getting involved with being a STEM ambassador?
I mean, a big part of it is it grows your network. I mean, look at us here today talking, and a key bit of advice that I would give to anyone who's trying to, make the way in this business is that your network is fundamental to that journey. Yeah, it is. You're not going to, on your own, you're not going to go far on your own. Well, you might do. You might be an amazing genius and you might be fine on your own. But the vast majority of us, like me, you need that network. You need friends. And this certainly, I would recommend, and anyone who's up for it, anyone at my company's up for it, will say, go and do it. Because if it does nothing else, it'll grow your confidence and grow your network. And that's continuity of work. That's confidence that you're going to have work going forward. You're going to see opportunities that most people who don't have that network won't see. You could go on, couldn't you? How important is a network? And yes, it's good giving back, but from a personal and business perspective, anyone in my business who's growing the network and they're confident and they're growing, well, that's good for me and it's good for them. Yeah, and I completely agree, and I work for Fisher German, and we're exactly the same in that if you've got an idea or you want to do something, then we can raise it, and 9 times out of 10 it gets authorised, and you can get on and actually get involved with this. We've got we do apprenticeships, we've got a graduate scheme. It's all about getting our industry out there and as open as possible. One thing I wanted to ask you was, how did you get into your role now, and what was it that made you do what you do now? So what would you have liked to have heard, or could somebody have bridged a gap for you? Well, I mean, it's quite so you kind of. I don't think I really did it on purpose. I don't think I ever set out to be a business owner on purpose. I think I was chasing money at the time, because I was working as an employee for Costain, and the wages were decent. But then, the thing with this industry is there's contract work out there, and you can go and be a contractor, and you can be a bit of a mercenary and earn more money. And that's kind of how it started for me. But having thought, so as a contractor and as a mercenary, you can go anywhere. You could be in London 1 month, and you could be in Scotland the next, and then you end up being all over the place. And so when my daughters came along, I thought to myself, well, I don't really want to do this anymore. I want to be home, I want to be around. So my idea of what the business looked like and being a contractor evolved, and it's evolved into working closer to home, so earning a bit less money. And then the pandemic happened. I was working for BP at Manchester Airport, and we had the pandemic. And I got given my notice. I'd saved some money up in the business, and I had some friends that I knew who were kind of, not overly enthralled with the work that they were doing. So I had a word with my friends, and we kind of put some money together, and we had a go at it. And we probably, in the first year, I would say, if there's a top 10 list of mistakes that a business can make, we definitely made at least 9 of them. And we still, we're making less mistakes, but we still make mistakes. And that's how it was a bit of evolution of the things that were happening at the time, and circumstances for me. And I look back and you think there were times when we probably would have given up, certainly, if we weren't together as a group. But now, now we seem to be doing okay, and we're looking forward rather than backwards. So that's kind of how I've fallen into doing what I'm doing now. Is that enough as an answer?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That's great. And it's, you've obviously got that entrepreneurial mindset and a growth mindset that means that you don't give up at the first hurdle. And I think it's amazing with children, you look at the problem solving techniques that they are encouraging them to use now. It's not necessarily about getting to the right answer first time. It's about enjoying the process of the problem and wanting to solve it, because as we all know, life is not a series of events that happens and you tick each box and it's a straight line that you move across. It's ups and downs and challenges, and life happens. And I think the way that children are taught now is probably very different to how I was taught, and you were probably taught, at school, where it was X and Y makes this, whereas now it's about why does it make that? How have you come to that solution? And I think that's really
I think resilience is the word that I sometimes use when we talk to teachers, and how can we build some resilience into the activities that we do. So don't give up. You've done it once, you might need to do it another 20 times. You just keep doing it until you get it right. And it's hard to build that in. Yeah,
it is. But I think I'm always fascinated by children if you say no, they tend to find another way. They're a bit like water. They just I don't know, obviously we've got good representation of the water industry, but it's like, if water can find a path, it will find a path. It doesn't matter what you put in its way, it seems to find a way over, under, round, through. And I love that sort of analogy that children are incredible at finding those solutions and working with what they've got to try and make that happen. It's if you can't be there for your little ones, my daughter, if we're busy doing something and I'll be like, yeah, I'll come and help you with that in 1 second. By the time I've got there, she's probably solved the problem. If I'd gone and helped her, I could have done it for her. But actually, by me just backing off a little bit and saying I'll be there in a minute, she's actually found a solution. She's found a way around it, because that's what they do. And I think it's how we try and maintain that growth mindset, so that by the time you get into work, you're still open to all those opportunities. I've just seen a question pop up. So I presume you must be based in the UK to apply. Good question. My understanding is that the STEM Ambassadors is a UK thing, but I don't think, I'm sure other countries have different ways of doing it. So if you reach out to us, I can raise it through our STEM Ambassadors platform and find out the answer to that question. I think it started off as an EU-funded project, so it may have its roots in the EU, and we've realised it was a good thing and carried it on, I think, or we're at the tail end of the funding. I'm not sure, but I think it started off with EU funding. Yeah, and it's really interesting what you were saying about the having access to equipment to take into schools and to show the kids what can be used, because I find that's even just turning up when most of my working life, most people that know me know that I'm dressed like this, but I love nothing better than putting my fireproof overalls on, my hard hat, my boots, my goggles, my gloves, and walking into schools, because they're just straight away, I take my hat off, give it to the kids, they want to put it on, they want to put your high vis on, they want to know why your overalls are so heavy and bright, and what the different colours mean and all that sort of stuff. I think you can't really beat taking this, the touchy-feely stuff to them and letting them have a look at it. We took some jet fuel into a school once. How did that go?
the risk, well, the headmaster wasn't too keen on it, and then we had to do a risk assessment, and we had to put it in a jar within a jar, and have it sealed up in a certain way. But anything can be done. And you know how many kids out there have held jet fuel?
Yeah.
You know, it's just a cool thing to do, and something they'll probably talk about and remember. And it's like you, as a female, going into a classroom with your high vis and your flame-proof overalls, and that's a good thing, because it's challenges perception, doesn't it? And it shows that, you know, that boys, it doesn't have to be boys doing that. It can be, anyone can do it. That must be a good thing, you know. We did a class in Manchester at school, and I went with a girl, and she had all the gear. I had all the gear on. And she got surrounded. She was surrounded by children. You know, what do you do? She said, well, I'm an engineer. And they couldn't believe it. And you think, well, surely that's a good thing. That can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I think you sometimes question how important representation is, and it's only when my daughter, who's 5, was flicking through a book, and she said, I am her, and I was like, okay, we look at her, and in the book, her is a mum, say. She's like, I am her, mummy. Okay, you're her. She sees herself in everything you do. So if we don't put everybody in the equipment, then they don't have anybody they can match themselves up to. So by turning up and wearing your pipeline kit and talking about what you do means from a female perspective, the girls can look up and go, I can be her. And I think you're right, it's as simple as that. Sometimes it's just as simple as going in and showing that anybody can do this. You know, there's perceptions, but anybody can do it. I've got a friend who's a doctor, and she does a similar thing, going into schools with a white coat and a stethoscope. I think it's just really important that children see that representation.
Yeah, agree 100%.
Another question, with International Women's Day coming up, how would you encourage more girls to take STEM into further education? Great question. Ben, I'll let you answer first, with 2 daughters.
That's not fair. So I'm a big advocate and a promoter of women engineering, and the way I do it is by trying my best to hire not anyone over anyone, but I try and look at the market and bring women into engineering. That's what I can do. If I go to schools and talk about women in engineering, Kate Lazenby will attest to this. I will generally bring a girl with me to try, because a middle-aged bald man with a beard talking about women in engineering is a little bit ironic, because we're part of the problem, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, but we're also the solution. We can do something about it. So, what am I doing personally? Trying to identify and hire women who have got a lot of potential and otherwise wouldn't be hired in this industry. And yeah, I wish I could do more. So what about you, Rachel?
Me, okay, so encouraging more girls into STEM. I think for me, it's about spreading out the opportunities and what that might look like. Sometimes I think when you're at school and you're doing a series of subjects, and I'll not forget it, our 2 sons, why am I studying this subject? When am I ever going to need to know Pythagoras in real life if I don't really like maths? Those things that you feel like you're being taught for the sake of being taught rather than because it's useful to you. And I think that's what can be quite challenging for kids, so especially teenagers, to think about, well, how is this going to benefit me in real life? And I think if we as industry can take the roles that we have available and the opportunities with those back into the classrooms, that they actually tie in and mean something that you can touch and feel and understand, that really helps people want to do it more. So if you know that maths, for example, maths wasn't my strongest subject, but it's really useful, and the principles of it are really useful in my day job now. So I think it's encouraging, it's showing the bigger picture and explaining the different opportunities. And I think that only happens when we talk about what we do as an industry, and get out there and spend time with young adults and children, to encourage them. And I think things like International Women's Day is a great opportunity for us to showcase some really different and unusual roles that you might not have thought of, not necessarily for a female, but for anybody, because I think we just have that challenge that children are asked at the age of 16 to pick their A levels to decide what they want to be when they're older. And I don't know about you, but I wanted to be a physio when I was 15. I didn't even know there was a role as a pipeline surveyor. So those two things haven't even collided at that point for me. So I think it's, if we can take the different industries and opportunities into schools, that will encourage people to take those subjects to a greater extent.
I agree with that 100%. But and I spoke to Kate about this probably within the last 6 months. But I believe that it's more at primary school to get this kind of spark of interest, and you need to be maintained. But I believe that it's sometime at primary school when children have a spark and they say, well, actually, I'm quite interested in that, and that's when it's born. I'm not saying they necessarily do anything about it, but that's in my experience. You can see children quite young say, actually, that's really interesting. And like, archaeology, so one child that was quite interested in archaeology. And I would imagine that's probably going to stick with them forever. My youngest daughter's really interested in dinosaurs. Now, a lot of children are interested in dinosaurs, but, she's stuff like that sticks with you. I was interested in dinosaurs. I'm still interested in dinosaurs, but it came from when I was at primary school, I think, and it's trying to key into that spark of interest. It doesn't really answer the question about International Women's Day, but I was just kind of adding on to what you said.
No, but I think it's really interesting. It's getting all children to take STEM, further, because if there's such, I think the principles of science, technology, engineering, and math are just so present in everything that we do, whether you're an ecologist or a lawyer or a project manager or a surveyor, engineer. I think sometimes we just think that medicine is only applicable to doctors, whereas actually it's just so much broader than that. And actually, the more we can encourage that, the better. But you just can't beat that interaction at a really young age with something that's interesting. Your experiences, do inform what you end up doing. But I think, it's a really important point. Right, I'm going to see if we've got any more questions popped up, and then I'm going to round us off, I think. Is there anything else you want to add, Ben? Any other hints or tips or encouragement you want to add?
I think resources aren't just in the form of stuff that you can go and pick up at the Museum of Science and Industry, because some people might not be as lucky as me and live near Manchester or live near Leeds or live near London. There's resources online, so it's not being inspired to actually go and do a lesson. It took me, I think, 4 years before I built up the courage to actually go and stand up in front of some children to do a lesson or do an activity. But I got that from you. There's resources online that you can look at. You can look at what people have done in the past. There's a library of things. You can literally just flick through. I know you touched on it before, Rachel, but I think that's really important that if anyone's feel like they want to get involved and they want to do it, you don't have to come up with these ideas yourself. People have been through this learning before, and all that learning from experience is available. So if that's a blocker, don't let it be a blocker, really.
Yeah, I think
that's the only thing.
That's a really good point. One of the just on that, so one of the things the STEM Ambassador Hub asked me to do was just do a 10-minute video on what I studied at school versus to what my career is now. 10 minutes, just what did I do? Why did I do it? And I went through ups and downs and peaks and troughs in that. But what's important is that it shows us multiple ways to get into different industries. And I think it's a really there's lots of different things you can do, but if you could only give 10 minutes, you can still have an impact. So it's just really, really well worth it. We've got a question here to you, Ben. How did you get in contact with the museum? I've recently become a STEM ambassador, just starting out and trying to get some ideas.
Do you live in the northwest, or do you live near Leeds, or do you live in London, Sophie? Okay, cool. So you just get in touch with the museum. So look it up online. There'll be a number. When you ring the number in Manchester, there are options. I think it's option 5. It says STEM ambassadors. That's simple. You ring up, someone will answer. Have a chat with them. They're super friendly. They're glad to have you. They're grateful that people want to help. And I don't know what it's like in Leeds, and I don't know what it's like in London. But in Manchester, they've got all the archives in the basement, and there's stuff in there. It's just really cool. There's stuff in there that you just wouldn't get to see anywhere. Exhibition stuff that's been used in an exhibition and now it's been put in storage. Yeah, ring them up is the way I did it. I don't think there's an option online. I think there is. If you go online, I think in Manchester there's a STEM button on Manchester, but it gives you the phone number to ring. So it's the same way.
Just again, what's the museum actually called?
In Manchester, it's the Museum of Science and Industry.
There you go, Museum of Science and Industry.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you very much. Cool, well, I'm going to bring that to a close. Thank you everybody for listening, and Ben, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and chatting with me. It's been really good to just expand a little bit about on what a STEM ambassador is and what it means, and you know, the benefits it's brought both of us. I think, you know, goes without saying, really, it's a really worthwhile thing to do. Just a shout out to other guild events. So we have the National Dinner next week. I look forward to seeing lots of people there. We also have our PDN training day on the 12th, so Professional Development Network. Really good agenda planned for that. So if you're not signed up and you'd like to be, I think there is still space to join that as well. We also have our Guild Awards running. So if you go onto the webpage, we can pop a link on the chat, but the Guild Awards, the submissions need to be in, I think, for the 19th of April, but please do have a look. We've got two new categories this year, health and safety and net zero. So really worth having a look at and seeing if you've got someone you can put forward just to demonstrate the expertise and the excellence and the innovation that we have. So I'll just put the link on. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you everyone.
No worries.
Cheers.
Cheers.